It might come as a surprise, but John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office is also one of the most controversial chapters in the entire series. Known for his iconic role as Jim Halpert, Krasinski has often reflected fondly on his time in the Scranton branch of Dunder Mifflin, but when pressed about his favorite moment from the show, he didn't pick a heartfelt prank or a romantic Jim and Pam scene. Instead, he chose an episode that, while undeniably memorable, has sparked heated debate ever since it aired. For some fans, it's a hilarious and bold early swing. For others, it's a cringeworthy misfire that pushed the show's awkward comedy to an uncomfortable extreme. Even though The Office would go on to become a beloved comedy juggernaut, the episode Krasinski singles out came long before the show truly found its footing. It aired during the rocky early days of the series, when The Office was still trying to differentiate itself from its British predecessor. The fact that John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office is also one that was eventually pulled from syndication says a lot about how comedy has changed in the years since. The episode in question is Season 1's Diversity Day, one of the most debate-inducing moments in the show's history. John Krasinski named Diversity Day as his favorite episode of The Office. Krasinski's surprising pick shows his appreciation for the show's earliest and boldest creative swings. John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office isn't from the later seasons when the show had hit its stride, but rather from the uncertain early days of Season 1. In a 2018 interview with People, via Yahoo, Krasinski revealed that Diversity Day holds a special place in his heart. Despite only being the second episode of the show, it left a strong impression on both fans and cast members for its unapologetically awkward humor and fearless commentary on workplace culture. For Krasinski, it was the moment he realized The Office was willing to go all in on its unique tone, and he loved it. In Diversity Day, corporate sends a representative to Dunder Mifflin to conduct a seminar after Michael Scott, Steve Carell, impersonates Chris Rock during a meeting, sparking a wave of HR panic. Michael, never one to give up control, takes matters into his own hands and leads a wildly inappropriate and tone-deaf diversity training session of his own. What follows is one of the most uncomfortable and infamous scenes in The Office history, employees forced to wear index cards with racial or cultural labels while trying to role-play each other's identities. Krasinski explained that it was on this episode that he and the cast first saw Steve Carell fully become Michael Scott. While The Office US pilot was more of a copy and paste from the UK version, Diversity Day gave the American series its voice. That voice was risky, boundary-pushing, and not always comfortable. For Krasinski, the brilliance of Diversity Day was in its boldness and the way it made people squirm, not because it was offensive for the sake of it, but because it held a mirror up to corporate America's awkward approach to diversity. That's a huge reason why John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office still stands out 2 decades later. Although John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office helped the show find its comedic voice, Diversity Day is far from universally loved. In fact, it's become one of the most controversial episodes in the series' entire run. When it first aired in 2005, the episode sparked debate for its depiction of Michael's misguided attempt at diversity training. However, years later, as cultural awareness grew and standards for representation in media shifted, the episode was met with renewed scrutiny. Eventually, Diversity Day was even pulled from syndication in certain markets in 2021, via MSN, effectively scrubbing it from TV reruns. The controversy centers around how Diversity Day approaches race, stereotypes, and workplace sensitivity. While the episode is clearly satirical, mocking how corporations often handle these issues with superficial gestures, it also relies heavily on racial stereotypes and uncomfortable jokes to make its point. The infamous index card scene in particular has drawn intense criticism, with each employee wearing a card featuring labels like Asian, Jewish, or Indian, and being asked to interact based on those identifiers. The intent was to expose the absurdity of racism and corporate diversity policies, but the execution left many viewers feeling that the jokes went too far. NBC has never officially banned the Diversity Day episode of The Office, but it has been removed from syndication packages and streaming platforms in some regions. That kind of quiet removal reflects how sensitive networks and distributors have become about legacy content that doesn't align with current standards. While the episode remains available on platforms like Peacock, it often comes with a content warning or is tucked deep in the show's episode listings. Even fans of The Office are divided on Diversity Day. Some argue it's a necessary piece of the show's DNA, capturing its early willingness to push boundaries. Others believe it's an outdated relic that crossed too many lines. Yet the fact that John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office is also the one many find hardest to watch shows just how complex its legacy really is. Although John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office was Diversity Day, that early chapter is now more of an outlier than a blueprint. Over time, The Office evolved significantly as a show, not just in tone, but in the way it handled sensitive topics and characterized Michael Scott. By the end of Season 1, it was clear that some recalibration was needed. The Office Season 2 softened Michael's edges considerably, making him less of an abrasive boss and more of a lovable, misguided goof. That shift made The Office more relatable and helped cement its status as a modern sitcom classic. Diversity Day pushed the envelope so hard that The Office writers quickly realized they had to strike a better balance between edgy comedy and genuine heart. Later controversial episodes, such as Sexual Harassment, Gay Witch Hunt, and Scott's Tots, were still provocative, but they carried more nuance and often gave Michael a chance to grow or reflect. The writing matured as the series continued, and so did the characters. Even Dwight, who started off as a one-note oddball, became more human over time. In hindsight, Diversity Day serves as a snapshot of The Office at its most raw and unfiltered. It was experimental, edgy, and sometimes uncomfortable to watch. That's exactly why John Krasinski's favorite episode of The Office is so important. It represents a turning point, both for the series and for Michael Scott. Without it, The Office might never have taken the risks that defined its identity. But it also had to grow beyond that episode to become the show fans ultimately fell in love with.